we pick it up and we start living the way we are seeing others living, or the things that are around us, the way we respond to them, they determine that kind of learning. So most of our behavior, such as speech patterns, beliefs, values, and even eating habits, are acquired through what we are calling imitation or social learning, or imitating other people. So you always learn a new thing. Anytime you go to a new place, you interact with new people, you always learn something from them. And the social learning goes on. It has no specific context. It goes on. You live with, you interact with, you walk around with. There's something you pick. I'm back. I don't know what had happened to my system. I'm back. I'm back. Um, so we are saying you're getting me now? We say the psychologist who is associated with this social learning theory is Albert Bandura. We are saying social learning takes place with, it doesn't require a particular or specific context for it to take place, but it takes place in all around and throughout our life. We said again, children may pick up behavior cautiously or unconsciously every day by watching parents, peers, teachers, and others. And every behavior observed by children has the potential of being modeled. Modeled is the same as being imitated, and it becomes also, you start behaving the same way. Can you hear me now? Thank you that you can hear me now. Something had gone wrong with my mic, but I am back. So Dura carried out a lot of experiments in this area of social learning, or how we learn through the social learning, and he concluded that we learn through direct reinforcement, for example, praise, direct imitation, and vicarious conditioning or vicarious reinforcement. Remember, we discussed vicarious reinforcement the other time. And vicarious reinforcement, if we can remind ourselves again, is that vicarious reinforcement happens when we see others rewarded or punished for a particular action, and then we increase or decrease our behavior. For example, that we have here is when a student works very hard after, for example, a student may work very hard after observing another student being rewarded for good work. For what we call vicarious reinforcement. That it is a form of social learning which plays because it's about imitating, it's about modeling. So you see, somebody put a lot of effort and they were rewarded, and therefore the other children will also, or students will also want to work hard so that they can also be rewarded, and that now becomes part of their mode of studying, and that can improve on their performance. So factors that facilitate social learning include the following: attention. So for you, for learning, social learning to take place, we must pay attention so that we can imitate properly. Then the other one is memory. So for social learning to take place, for imitation to be, for somebody to imitate something and get it correct, it must be registered in the memory. So here we are saying that behavior being observed must be processed mentally and stored in a long-term memory. We shall still discuss memory and see more about long-term memory. Once stored memory, information can be easily retrieved, and if the observed information is not successfully processed and stored in the memory, then the observed behavior cannot be reproduced. So unless what you are trying to model, to copy, and what you are trying to get does not register in the memory, then it is not easy to recall it back and see yourself practicing the same. So that is another factor that will cause social learning. And then another one is the mental skill. And this is about practice. Practicing is necessary for observed behavior to be reproduced perfectly. So we're saying skills like driving, riding, typing, drawing, and so on require practice. Not even that. Even for us, once we learn to be able to remember, especially during examination time, we also need to practice and get acquainted with the concepts of the area of study that we are supposed to be examined on. So remember again, this still goes back to us and tells us for us to be able, because we read to acquire knowledge, we need first of all to understand knowledge. And to understand it, we need to read and read, make it be part of it, so that we can apply it in different students. Another one is reinforcement. So we are saying if a model is rewarded for a particular behavior, the chances of the behavior being imitated are higher or modeled, since the observer shares the model's reward vicariously. And this is by Mwamwenta in his book of 1995. So here we are saying when you do something and you are rewarded for what you have done, so that behavior can be imitated. The chances of that behavior being imitated is high. Actually, it takes us back to vicarious reinforcements. Then another factor that will facilitate social learning is identification. So we are saying here, a child may feel the need to identify with someone, may be a parent, figure of authority, a peer, a hero, and so on, for modeling to be effective. In other words, we are saying you must identify with the kind of either the person who has the behavior that you are likely to imitate, or with the knowledge that you are likely to imitate, and it becomes part of you. So identification is necessary. In other words, like here we are saying, a child must feel the need to identify with someone who may be their parent. So you see, some of our behaviors we pick from the people who brought us up. So that is what we are calling identification. So as a result, you formed a way of life. And that lifestyle you picked from either a parent, somebody in authority, uh, or your peers. That one, you started behaving like them, or there's something you learned from them, and it is became part of your life. Then identification is also necessary for social learning to take place. Then we have also another factor here is the status of the model. And here we are saying models of high social status are more likely to be copied. For example, a student leader or a popular student is imitated more frequently than an ordinary student. Modeled by learners more frequently than fellow pupils. And this is important because we are teachers of tomorrow. So what we are saying here is that as teachers, we also need to be people who can be modeled by our learners. And then the question we should be asking ourselves is, what will they model from us? Will it be something that can benefit them, or will it be something that will give them some behaviors that are not admirable? Then we also have for behavior to be modeled, the model must also be nurturant. When we talk of nurturant, we mean somebody who is friendly, caring, warm, welcoming. So such, if we have such like behavior, models around us, we are likely to pick up from them because we admire the way they carry themselves up or around, or the way their lifestyle is. But we are also saying that a model who is uncaring, indifferent, or don't care, kind of, somebody who is rude, threatening, is not likely to be modeled, especially when we have teachers who are like that, teachers who are careless, teachers who don't care about the welfare of the learners, teachers who threaten learners, such like people we saw. Students will not even miss being in your class. But if you are warm, you are nurturant, you are welcome, you are friendly, and you are caring, you find that your students will always want to be in your class and that they will like to do your subjects. So this one determines, I know we are doing specializing in different areas. So this one will determine, especially if your subject is elective, this one, what the kind of model you are to your learners will determine on whether they will pick your subject or not, if it is an elective subject. So it is very important to us teachers that we be nurturant. Then another factor that facilitates learning through social learning is consistency of behavior. If the behavior is consistent, it is more likely to be imitated. In other words, it's something that you identify with. It's a behavior that if anybody talks about you elsewhere, everybody knows that is you, and that is the way you carry yourself, or that is your lifestyle. Then we're asking ourselves, as educators, what are the educational implications of social learning? We're saying that being a good model to your learners. From the teacher, pupils learn about kindness, cleanliness, generosity, neatness, self-discipline. And of course, if you are a disorganized teacher, if you are selfish teacher, then we are now asking ourselves, what will our learners get from us? So we need to show them kindness. If we are clean, they will also want to model us. Generous with our knowledge and the way we interact with them. So naturally being good and warm to the learners. Here I can see selfishness and disorganization. So I wanted here to change selfishness to selflessness, so that your whole being is for their welfare. You need to be selfless when you are serving your learners. So another one, so here we are getting our behavior will be very necessary, and we will be, as teachers, we are modest to our learners. What do we want them to pick from us? We also have vicarious reinforcements. That one we discussed earlier. But here, this is what we are saying. Punishing a student who is behaving in a class can deter other students from engaging in a similar behavior. So this is in a way of a recap. I remember somebody in this class who was asking why when a few people in the class misbehave, the whole class is punished. So now you can understand it's about vicarious reinforcement. So approval of pupils' behavior or performance can set an example for other students who wish for similar approval. So all that facilitates social learning. So being nurturant, we have discussed that again. If as a teacher, you are nurturant, you are likely to be popular and modeled by your learners. Learners are likely to enjoy your subjects, and likely to work hard to please you and receive your approval. Another educational implication is making learners to work together in small groups, because if this is done, those who excel will serve as models to the others, and they will try to work hard so that they can be like their classmates or group colleagues who are doing well. So that brings us to the end of social learning theory, and I believe we understand it. So the key thing here about social learning, what factors facilitate social learning and what are the educational implications of social learning? So we need to get that one very clearly. The factors that facilitate social learning and the educational implications of social learning. And you can see all about learning, even the way we have grown up since we went to standard 1 and up to where we are. You can see the factors that facilitate social learning and how important it is to us teachers if we really want our students to do well. We can apply social learning. So the next theory that we will discuss is cognitive theories of learning. So remember, when we started with theories of learning, we said that each theory will have its emphasis. Emphasis will be more placed on the area where the person who formulated the theory emphasized. So when we look at the factors that facilitate social learning, we can see where Albert Bandura laid his emphasis on, and most of us teachers. So cognitive theories of learning. This is another theory, and all these theories are opening avenues for us teachers, so that when we go out there to the field and we're interacting with our learners, then we have so much for us to use so that we can have impacts when we teach our learners. Remember, learning is a relatively permanent change in behavior. So we need to impact that change in behavior. And more so when we are educating them. You remember in your curriculum studies, you have defined education as the acquisition of knowledge, skills, attitudes, and character. So all these theories, especially social learning theory, is about character formation. It's about character formation and attitude formation. So even as they learn, we must really educate their whole being. So let us look at cognitive theories of learning. In other words, here we are saying these theories are concerned about the mental process involved in learning, and the learning that may not be immediately demonstrated. They provide for the possibility of learning as an internal thinking process whereby we can learn to solve a complex problem by thinking about a previous solution in a new light. I don't know whether somebody is interfering. So if you have some noise near you, please make sure that the noise is not there or something that may affect our communication. So in contrast with the conditioning theories, which describe behavior in terms of observable responses to stimuli, we are saying that cognitive theories of learning, they are more about internal thinking process, where we can learn to solve complex problems by thinking about previous solution in a new situation or in a new light. So all what we are saying here is that this kind of the cognitive learning, we will not observe it. We will not see the change, but we can see the change by we will not observe it by seeing how the behavior is changing, but we will see the change in behavior by seeing in terms of, like, now when we do these units, I will not be able to look at you and know that you have changed your behavior because of going through these units. But I will know some learning took place when I examine you, when I give you a test, and you can respond appropriately as the requirements of these units. So that will now tell me you have the knowledge of psychology of learning. And if you have the knowledge inside you, then as you carry it with you, it is going to be practiced elsewhere in new circumstances where that knowledge is required. So especially as teachers, even with the learning or reading to pass the exam, we read to have the knowledge so that we can use it out there in the field and practice that knowledge to show that we have been to school and we have done, we have been learning, and now we can show that we have the knowledge within us, depending on how we handle our situations and solve problems that arise. We apply the knowledge that we have inside ourselves to solve problems in new situations. So cognitive psychologists study the mental processes involved in learning about our world. So they emphasize the unobservable cognitive aspects of learning that goes on within the subject, in this case within the person, because majorly when we deal with cognitive learning, we want to be able to either give you a test and you can do, and we can know that you have learned. Let's look at the next slide. So the cognitive psychologists are interested in people's perceptual processes of attention, selection, organization, our abilities to form mental images, and our reasoning processes. So majorly, cognitive psychologists majorly deal with how we look at things in terms of what do we see in our minds. So they deal with our perceptual processes of our attention, selection, and organization, our abilities to form mental images, and our reasoning processes. Mental images are what we call concepts. How do we conceptualize new situations? You are in a situation. how do you interpret and how do you see inside your mind? How do you see what surrounds you? And how do you use it to benefit you for the situation that you are in? So that is how we perceive our environment. How do we see the world around us? The world around us could be our colleagues, could be what we're learning, maybe in class, could be even what we are experiencing. What kind of interpretations or what images form in our minds? And how do we reason? So cognitive is about the reasoning power of our brains, of our minds. Some of the influential researchers, psychologists who are involved in cognitive theories of learning include Wolfgang Kohler and Edward Tolman. We'll also see Piaget, who is also in the line of cognitive development. So some kinds of learning must involve higher order processes in which people's thoughts and memories and the way they process information account for their behavior responses. So here, it is what has gone on in your mind that will determine the way you will behave or react to the environment or to what is to the situation that you find yourself. So this is what we call higher order processes. Whatever goes on in our minds is so I've seen that Wolfgang Kohler and Edward Tolman majorly but in the next slide we see Jean Piaget. Jean Piaget was involved in the cognitive development of young children. So we want to see what did these psychologists who studied how the mind of a small child develops from the child is born, from the time the child is born up to a certain level when we now talk of either teenage or adulthood or young adulthood. And therefore, specifically, we will look at Jean Piaget's cognitive theory of learning because we are teachers and we need to understand our children, our pupils, our students, and everybody else around us whom we are their models. We need to understand them. So Jean Piaget majorly dealt with the development of the minds of from a small child all the way they up to the process from being a baby all the way to being a teenage or a young adult. What goes on in the mind of a human being at those stages of development? I know in the unit EPS200, you dealt with something we call development. I don't know what you called that unit. Developmental psychology, something like that. So, and I'm sure even at that time you also talked about Jean Piaget. But here we want to understand it in terms of psychology of learning. How do children learn? We are looking at Jean Piaget's cognitive theory of learning in terms of how do children learn from one stage to another. I'm sure when you looked at it in terms of developmental psychology. But here we look at it in terms of psychology of learning. So Piaget drew attention to the ways children think. He focused on cognitive processes and in particular the development of reasoning and the logical thinking of children. He proposed that there are qualitative differences in reasoning among children in different levels of cognitive development. So I'm sure in developmental psychology, you saw how the thinking abilities develop from one stage or from one age to the next age. So here we are saying Piaget developed a proposition that there are qualitative differences in reasoning among children in different levels of cognitive development. Cognitive development has to do with your age. At the age where you are in, how much can you get and how much can your mind process? So we are saying there that sorry for that interruption. So we are saying here that pupils at various developmental stages think differently and have varied abilities to process information. Have varied abilities to process information, and I think that one we know that depending on the developmental stage that you are in, your ability also to process information will also depend on the developmental stage that you are in. I remember, I know in another unit you talked about chronological age and the other one we call your real age and your chronological age. In terms of, according to your age, we expect you to behave this way, but what are we getting? Are you behaving the way you are supposed to be behaving and processing information as per your age? And we are saying from the previous page, we said that should, or not even the previous page, the point just below above this one. Pupils at various developmental stages think differently and have varied abilities to process information. Depending on your developmental stage, how much can you process? So some people, when you look at their age, they are not within there. They don't have the ability or the ability that is in line with their age. Say the developmental stage, they have a particular age, and at that age, people at that age are expected to behave in a certain way or to show some characteristics. But we are saying it is not automatic. There are other limitations which might interfere with you behaving as per your expectation, as expected of your age. So in this cognitive development theory of children, Piaget studied how children think, develop their notion of time, space, mathematics, and the reality. So this is what we are saying here. When children are growing up, there's the way they view time, there's the way they view space, there's the way they view things in terms of numbers, and then there's the way they relate reality to their to what is around them. So Piaget's ideas have been applied to curriculum development and the classroom instruction. We shall see how. This is because when you look at that point, the point number 3 in this slide, pupils at various developmental stages think differently and have varied abilities to process information. So when we say Piaget's ideas have been applied in curriculum development and in classroom instruction, so remember, the curriculum is developed in such a way that we have the lower levels, and from the lower levels you build up the knowledge or the concepts and the kind of units that you do at different levels in your school life are in line with the thinking, with the developmental stages of the learners. Because the things that are taught and maybe in standard 4 or grade 4, you could not have accommodated them in terms of your developmental stage at standard 1. The same thing applies to us here, even at this level of that is why we have units for year 1, year 2, year 3, and year 4. And if you follow through your way of studying here in the university, you find that the units are getting more complex as you move from your first year to your second year to your third year to your fourth year. So this is quite key. It is because when you are first year, the things that you are going to learn in third year, you would not have. You would not have accommodated them when you were a first year. So the curriculum is built in such a way that the complex concepts or units are done at a later stage when people have matured a bit. Sorry that this slide is a little bit, I don't know why it behaved the way it is behaving, but I'll read through basic concepts that involve Piaget's cognitive theory of development. Piaget differentiated between 3 types of knowledge. Remember, Piaget is dealing with from the previous slide, we are saying that Piaget, in his cognitive development theory of children, Piaget studied how children think, develop their notion of time, space, mathematics, and the reality. And he therefore came up with 3 types of knowledge that children possess or go through as they grow up, as they develop. The first one is physical knowledge, and this is knowledge about objects acquired through how do children get the knowledge of objects. That is it. Physical knowledge. This is knowledge about objects acquired through acting on them and observing the results of the actions. Such actions include touching the objects, looking at the objects, lifting the objects, throwing the objects, listening, and so on. And this knowledge is obtained through the process of discovery. So if you look at children at that tender age, between 1 and 2 years, 2 years to 7 years, they only understand objects by either touching them and seeing how they behave. Sometimes they even want to place them in their mouth and taste them. So here the child is practicing the 5 senses. They interact with the objects by using the 5 senses. The 5 senses are the sense of touch, taste, smell, the sight, and is it hearing? And they believe that objects, they want to understand. They want to understand how this one, they will feel it. If they can't feel it, touch it, they want to place in their mouth and want to see how does this object feel in the mouth, and so on. So this is what we are calling physical knowledge, where you just want to work with the objects and see how they behave. So according to Piaget, children acquire knowledge about the physical attributes of objects by actively manipulating them. That is what I've just said. Thus, the child must have experience with concrete items which the teacher can provide. And when you look back, you find that what we are saying is that if you look at the formative stages of young children, especially at pre-primary, they learn using objects. They can understand the world by touching, by interacting, by manipulating objects. Then the other knowledge is about logic, mathematical knowledge. What is Piaget saying here? This knowledge is acquired through creating and inventing relationships between objects and symbols. It is the type of knowledge involved in understanding mathematics concepts. This knowledge is involved when children classify objects, like put the round objects together, squares together, compare them, and so on. They look at objects in terms of size, bigger and smaller, and they evaluate different points of view. And this kind of knowledge is gained through invention. Through invention. The first knowledge is through the process of discovery. They want to understand. They want to feel the object. They want to look at that object. They want to draw it and see how it will behave. They want to test it and they feel how it feels, and so on. But the other one is about logic, mathematical knowledge. It's majorly through innovation. So you want to understand by differentiating. All this is about by differentiating and creating relationship. So we are saying there are people who don't see this, who cannot relate, who cannot form the mental images about relationships. And that is why we have people who are not friendly with the mathematics, because those relationships that are supposed to form in their mental images, what we call concepts, are not forming. And therefore, people will have difficulties in mathematics if they lack this logic, mathematical knowledge in their as they grow up. Then we have the social arbitrary knowledge. This is knowledge acquired through interaction with other people. I think it is the social knowledge that what we talked about in the social theory of learning. For example, language, values, rules, and morals. It also involves learning customs and facts, and this is the type of knowledge that can be incorporated in education. The social arbitrary knowledge. So when we look at the next slide, the cognitive development according to Piaget. Which define development according to Piaget. We have 4 principal factors which define development according to Piaget. So the first one, and it's not even according to Piaget, it is the reality. It is the reality put in written form in black and white. The first stage or principle, the first factor in terms of development, and I'm sure you did it in your developmental psychology, is what we call maturation. What does it mean? Maturation refers to the unfolding of the genetic plan of life. These are things that you have no control over. At a certain age, you see your body changing. At a certain age, your mind can accommodate this much knowledge or information. So these are things we have no control over, and they are the genetic plans of life in a person. So this genetic plan of life is what we are calling the master plan. So this master plan acts as a timetable that determines when certain changes or events will occur in somebody's life. Maturation is important in learning. Why is it important in learning? There are some things, unless genetically or unless we are at a certain age, there are some things we cannot accommodate or process in our thinking, in our thinking processes. And that is why I gave the example that when you're first year, the things you do in the first year will be a little bit simpler than the things you are doing in your second year. And the things you are doing in your second year, they are simpler than the things you do in your third year and in your fourth year. This is still the process of maturation. We want to give, learners should be given what they can accommodate as per level of maturation. And that is why we start from standard 1, standard 2, standard 3, and the concepts go on becoming more complex as we grow up, because our thinking processes can accommodate the things that we can accommodate at certain levels of learning. Please, I don't want people to start exchanging in my public chats. Please. Anson. Somebody says, hello, madam. How about 2 and a physical class next session? That's on. Why do you want a physical class? So look at, so here, the example that we are getting in terms of maturation, once we understand it, is that just sure learn how to walk, talk, and process information mentally. So when we talk of maturation, these are stages in life where you cannot, one can, an earlier stage cannot pattern. Just like we are saying, a child must walk. So if you look at the way the child grows, as you looked at in your developmental psychology, you saw there are some stages which must happen. Then another principle factor, development is facilitated by the active interaction of the child with these environments. So you need to be exposed. A child needs to be exposed. And that is why from primary school, we go to secondary school. Secondary school, we go to college, we go to universities, and we go to other areas. It's about exposing ourselves so that even as we mature up, we can interact with the world. Then transmission. Social transmission refers to the information and the customs that are transmitted from parents and other people in the child's environment. This is commonly meant by education and learning. So you are getting educated and also getting new things in your life. Social transmission is the kind of learning that a child gets through customs, and it is majorly transmitted to the child from either parents and the people around the child's environment. So we have equilibration. This is the process by which children seek balance between what they know and what they are experiencing. It's not even necessarily children, even grown-ups, even us, even you. At any one stage in life, you'll be in a situation where you encounter new things around you, and you try to create room for them in your mental processes. And that is what we are calling equilibration here. It is the process by which children seek balance between what they know and what they are experiencing. When children are faced with information that calls for a new and a different analysis or activity, they enter a state of disequilibrium or imbalance. And when this occurs, they must change the way they deal with the information to establish a new, more state of equilibrium. Even as there are sometimes you find yourselves in a situation where you must now look at what you have, what you know, and use what you know to fit in the new situation, and therefore become stable. becomes stable. So Piaget believed that as the brain matures, it develops concepts which he called schemas. So what we are saying in the previous slide is that when you are trying to accommodate, to look at what you know, and now you want to accommodate the new situation, and so that it is not around them. And the next thing they will do is they will try to understand what is surrounding them. They will start touching. So later, schemas become more symbolic, internal, and mental. So by adulthood, the child will have built limitless number of schemas. In other words, or what we are saying here is that when the newborn baby will start by interacting with the breast of the mother. So that is the only thing they know, and it forms in their mind. Immediately the mother wants to breastfeed them, they know they must start suckling. So, and then they keep on looking at the people around them, majorly the mother, the brothers, the sisters there, and the people around them. And therefore, they will start to understand there are people around. So those schemas are forming. Then the baby starts to touch things here and then by the time they have grown, they have limitless number of schemas. In what those mental images are so many in their thinking processes in their mind. The thinking processes take place in the mind, so there are so many. So the process of building schemas is an adaptive one in which our schemas are continually being refined as a result of our experiences, and the adaptation is understood in terms of adjustment. In other words, what Piaget is saying here is that the process of building these mental images is adaptive and it is continuous. Everything that we go through in our experiences is accommodated in our minds, in our thinking processes. And therefore, when we talk of adaptation here, it says, how do we adjust ourselves to fit in a new situation? How do we adjust our thinking to accommodate new information that has come? So as the forces in the environment change, so must the individual's ability to deal with them. And therefore, adaptation or adjustment involves assimilation and accommodation. What is this assimilation? Assimilation is the process of absorbing new information into existing schemas. In other words, already you are in a situation where new information has come, and now you are trying to accommodate, to give it space in your thinking processes. That is what we call assimilation. So we have an example here. A child who sees a carton box and uses it as a motor van has assimilated the carton box into his or her structure and knowledge for a motor van. So he's now, the child has a knowledge of a motor van, but when they see a carton, they now want to use it as a motor van because the carton looks like a motor van. That's an example. So remember from slide 13, we are seeing that as the forces of the environment point, so much the individual's ability to deal with them. As the forces in the environment change, so much the individual's ability to deal with them, and therefore adaptation involves assimilation and accommodation. So here we are saying adaptation can be understood in terms of adjustment. As the forces of the environment change, so must the individual's ability to deal with them. So when the forces of the environment change, the individuals automatically must change and create an ability to be able to deal with them. And this is by the process of assimilation and accommodation. So we have said that assimilation is that process of absorbing the new information and trying to fit it into the existing schemas or mental images. That is assimilation. And accommodation involves modifying those existing schemas to fit new information or to meet the requirements of the new experience. That is accommodation. So when you read your notes, you'll it is linked up well. My notes are more summarized, so you'll be able to understand assimilation and accommodation. So here, an example here is a child who is used to picking light objects with one hand is faced by the task of picking a heavier one. What will that child do? They will first of all accommodate and use his or her two hands. So first of all, they will have assimilated, and then once they do that, they will now want to accommodate the new situation, and they will now try to use the two hands. After trying with the one hand, they can't lift. So in the process of assimilation, after assimilation, accommodation follows. So it is through these processes that a child learns according to Piaget. How do you use what you know in a new situation? That is what we call learning, and more so transfer of knowledge. So Piaget came up with the stages of development in young children, or not even in young children, from the time a child is born up to a certain level. And this was guided by the way he understood the thinking processes of children and what goes on in the high order levels of young children. So Piaget argued that children develop their cognitive abilities in stages, and each stage represents a different way in which the children reason and they deal with the world. So according to Piaget, the first stage is from 0 years to 2 years. And the Piaget called this stage the sensory motor or sensory motor. From the word sensory motor period, from the word sensory, it is where you are using your senses to understand the world. So between 0 and 2 years, the child tries to use the 5 senses to try to understand the world and explore the world around them. So here Piaget says that infants explore their world through the senses and the motor activities. So remember, we have the 5 senses, the 5 senses which involve touching, seeing, hearing, smelling, and what is the other one? Tasting. So through all that, the motor activities is where the child is now trying to interact with the objects around them and exercising using their muscles. That is why we call them motor activities. So to the child, objects are real when they are being experienced, and when they are out of sight, they cease to be. This is at the very early stages of the child. From 0 to 2 years, the child not even from 0 to 2 years. At the very early stages, maybe 0 to 6 months or so, the child does not know that when something gets out of sight, then they are still existing. But before, the very first sense that they have is that when you cannot see something, it ceases to be. But as this child develops, they gradually develop a sense of object permanence. That is, they get the idea that things do not disappear when they are out of sight. Things do not disappear when they are out of sight. So, at the very early stages in a child development, they will think what they cannot see is no longer there. But as they go through the 0 to 2 years, they start to develop the sense of object permanence. That is, even when something stops, when they stop to see something, it means that something is just somewhere. It is not that it has ceased to exist. Uh, um, a good example, let me go back to that slide 15. A good example is that at the very initial stages, when the child is, when you have this milk bottle, feeding bottle for the child, at some stage when the bottle falls off, the child does not bother. But then, with the time as the baby develops or grows, as time passes, it reaches a time still between 0 and 2 years, maybe after 6 months or so. When that feeding bottle falls, you see the baby turning. Those are what we are calling motor activities. You see the baby turning to find out where it has gone, because that is the time you now know the baby has developed the sense of object permanence, that when it ceases to be seen, it is still somewhere and I can still follow it. So you see them trying to check where that, if it is a feeding bottle, once it falls, the fact that they can't see it, in their mind, they will have developed the object permanence, that if I cannot see it, it is somewhere else. And therefore you see them scanning to try to see where it has gone. So this is when you get the sense of the baby is developing the object permanence. In other words, objects, when they disappear from our sight, they don't cease to exist. They are still existing somewhere else. So that was the age, called the sensory motor stage, where the child learns or experiences the world through the 5 senses and motor activities, 0 to 2 years. Then we have the pre-operational stage, which is 2 to 7 years. And according to Piaget, at this age, children can use symbols language. So remember, it is at this age where children start to develop a language. They start to talk. Of course, now you see between 0 and 2 years, majorly that is also the time the child starts to crawl, start to walk, touch, step odd on things, move around, and such like things. So that is why we are saying the child is using senses and their motor activities. So in this case here, between 2 to 7 years, the child uses symbols and the language, and the child can use something to present or to symbolize another thing. For example, a piece of wood to symbolize something like a motor vehicle. This ability is evident in pretend play. The children greatest achievement in this stage is the use of the symbolic thought. This is where we see a lot of pretend play, using playing with the objects and giving them names of the things they know or the things they see. Children at this stage cannot classify, seriate, solve problems that require knowledge of conservation or reverse process. They concentrate on only one dimension at a time and they judge everything in the basis of its appearance. So this is, look at the child between 2 and 7 years. If you have a child who is 5 years, you send them to the shop, they will go and come back. But if you tell them to trace the way they have gone and the way they have come back, they will not be able to tell you from here I moved to this point, from this point I went to this point, from this point I went to this point. That is why they are saying they have no knowledge of serial. They cannot trace from one point to another. They have no idea of reverse process. In other words, they cannot trace their way back. This is the same stage where they have no sense of quantity. Because at this stage, if you have a glass of water, put it in a narrow bottle, it will be the same quantity of water you put it in a bottle. You find that the bottle, if it is a narrow bottle, the water will be at a high level in terms of height. Then the same quantity of water in that, you put it in a wider bottle, it will be lower in terms of height. So if you ask this child, which one is more? The child will think in terms of the one I can see it is at a higher level, they will say it is more than the one at a lower level. So they have no sense of quantity, even at this stage, between 2 and 7 years. They have no sense of quantity. They cannot classify, and they cannot solve problems that require knowledge, conservation, process, or quantity. So we are saying that this stage are quite egocentric. They believe that one sees things in their point of view. Egocentric means very self-centered. Then we have the concrete operational stage. This is where many of the limitations of the pre-operational stage slowly out. And at this stage, the child can observe, reverse options, classify, and seriate, and they deal with concrete objects rather than abstractions. This is the stage where children learn by handling concrete objects. And that is why we see the importance of having teaching aids in our classes as teachers. We need to use things that the children can identify with, that they know, to explain the concepts that we want to pass to them. So here we are saying they are able to see or imagine objects, for example, like democracy and justice are too abstract for them. So the sense of abstraction is not there. They deal with the concrete things at concrete operational stage. Their stage, the formal operational stage, is from 11 or 12 years and above. And this is where we have the teenagers. So they gradually develop the ability to use scientific logic, deal with the abstractions, and separate what is real from what is possible. At this stage, they develop the ability to use hypothetical deductive logic, that is, the ability to form hypotheses, scientifically test it, and draw conclusions using deductive logic. So according to Piaget, we have the sensory motor stage, 0 to 2 years, the pre-operative stage from 2 to 7 years, the concrete operational stage, which is from 7 to 11 or 2 years, and then we have operational stage. I think that's where most of us are in terms of Yogo. Now in this formal operational stage, where now you can reason out. Your high order thinking processes are very well developed. You can question issues. You can understand things that are not even real. So we are saying you can differentiate between reality and the abstractions. You can hypothesize, you can test the hypothesis, and you can come up with the conclusions and make a deduction using your logic. You can reason out. Logic is about reasoning out. So when we look at the cognitive theories of learning, what educational implications, this is where it matters here. It is very, very important to us teachers here. So the educational implications are that the cognitive developmental approach to learning is very relevant to the teaching learning process because it explains how they learn and the process information at different levels of cognitive development. Remember, kind of children you're going to meet out there in the field once you graduate, or in your third year when you go to your teaching practice, they will be at the formal operational stage. That is the Form 1, Form 2, and more in the future meeting 1 to Form 4. So here, children in different developmental stages have different abilities and are different in the way they process information during learning. That is a very important factor when we now to apply the theory of learning. We need to understand as teachers that children at different developmental stages have different abilities and are different in the way they process information during learning. That's why in a particular in a class, you have what we call fast learners, we have what we call the average people, and we have the slow learners. So although they have the same age, they are at different I'm sure now you can hear me. What had happened, I think my internet got interrupted and I had to reconnect. I'm back. I'm back. Can you hear me now? So my internet got interrupted and I had to reconnect. So I believe now you can hear me now. So what we are saying as teachers, we need to understand that in a specific class, we'll have the fast learners, the slow learners, and those who are average. They will process information in a different in different rates, if I may use that word. So when you put that to also the slow learners and the average and the fast learners, it is up to you as a teacher when you are preparing your lesson to create to prepare your lessons in such a way that you'll be able to accommodate the fast learners in the same class, to accommodate the average, and to accommodate the slow learners. And you also need to know that the slow learners, you don't have to call them names. What you do is understand their level, see how they can accommodate new information, and create a speed in your teaching where you can lift the slow learners and you can also have room for the fast learners. So you don't go to class and assume everybody will be assimilating and accommodating information as fast as you want. So you also need that patience as a teacher to accommodate everybody in their level of development. Considering the child's level of cognitive development when formulating lessons and curriculum, that is what I have just said. So when you prepare so that you can accommodate all the learners in your class. And as a teacher, you must appreciate the fact that children develop at their own rate. That is what we call maturation. It is purely genetical. A child may enter and leave a particular stage at different times other than the limits proposed by Piaget. And therefore, in addition, some children in the same stage may be more advanced than others. That is what I have just said. So you need to accommodate them. And that is why in a class, although they are the same age, we have fast learners, slow learners, have learners, and therefore you need to accommodate them. It is not their it's not a mistake, but that is where they are in terms of their cognitive development. So as teachers, we are told that we should be helping children to develop their thinking and the reasoning abilities. So as teachers, we should help children to develop their thinking and the reasoning abilities. And you remember again in another slide, we said the whole purpose of school is to help children develop their thinking and the reasoning abilities. In another slide, we said that the purpose of a school is to help children develop their thinking and the reasoning abilities. And therefore, that is why as a teacher, you should be able to accommodate these learners and bring them up depending on their cognitive development or age or stage where they are, help them to build up and develop their thinking processes. So we also told as teachers, these are educational implications. As teachers, we need to provide children with opportunities to explore and try new things, especially in a concrete operational stage. Allow children to experiment for better understanding. And that is why we are saying that actively involve children in learning. Children develop their reasoning through experiences that stimulate thinking. Things like games, social interactions, puzzles, problems, and experimentation are experiences that stimulate thinking and learning in children. I don't know where, because I know majority of us in this class, we are either teaching history, CRI, geography, Kiswahili, and all the other theoretical subjects, which are not more practical. But remember, as teachers, we need to be very, very innovative when we are preparing our lessons and see how we can involve the learners, You don't just go there to talk to the learners, involve them, let them participate. Let them be part of the learning and the teaching process. So we also told using concrete examples when teaching elementary and primary school children, but there are some people who leave primary when they are still in when their cognitive developmental stage is still at as that one of a standard 7, standard 8 school going, but yet they are in form 1, form 2. And that is why we are told in point 1, help children to develop their thinking and the reasoning abilities. Don't rush them, but help them. So as teachers, we need to appreciate the need to wait for cognitive maturity before introducing certain concepts. So as a teacher, you should not ask children to learn something they are not developmentally ready for. But this is what we are saying here. Sometimes you realize what you are teaching, some children totally cannot get it. It is because developmentally they are not ready for that particular concept. So help them. So that is the cognitive theory of learning, and that is how important it is to us teachers. I am sure you can relate yourself with the cognitive theory of learning, with the social theory of learning, and now we are moving on to what we call the Gestalt theory of learning. Another theory of learning. Because I want us to break at 9:30, so I'll move a little bit faster, but I'll be able to bring the whole picture clear. The concept will come out. So we are asking ourselves, what is this Gestalt theory of learning? When we talk of Gestalt theory of learning, it involves helping the learners to see things in wholesome, not in pieces, not in pieces. So if you flash back, you remember when we were doing operant conditioning, we talked of behavior shaping. You remember where we said you need to reward, you need to reinforce every step where the learner seems to show that they are moving towards the direction, but they are trying. That is what we call behavior shaping. But when we talk about Gestalt theory of learning, this is where we must help learners to see things in a whole. Because when we look at the bits and the bits and the bits, it is not easy for a learner to connect the bits and from the bits see the whole. Here we are saying it's not like you have a human being's hand there. You have a human being's maybe a piece of the human being's one leg there, and another bit here, maybe a here, and then you expect them to see these form a human being. So it is when we have the whole human being that somebody can say this is a person, this is a human being. So we just thought theory of learning looks things in wholesome. So let me go through the points that I want to bring to you now. The Gestalt theory was founded by Max Wertheimer, Kurt Ofka, and Wolfgang Kohler, who believed that form perception is impossible to understand. Form perception is impossible to understand simply by analyzing the many sensations that are registered in the brain. We sense something. In other words, what we are saying here is that when we see the bits and the bits of something, it is not easy to understand that they form the whole. So we need to bring in the whole for the whole picture to form in the mind of the learner. So Gestalt, it's a German word which means form or configuration. The other word I can use for form is the shape. It means shape, form, or configuration. This theory emphasizes upon wholesome, which are, or in terms of wholes, complete, something that is complete, which are more than the sum of their parts. That is what I had just explained. In Gestalt, the whole dominates and gives meaning to the parts. In other words, you need to see the whole person before you can now start thinking of the parts of a person. That is all what I'm saying in other words. When we say the whole dominates and gives meaning to the parts, here we are saying you need first of all to form a picture of a person, for example, and then you can now start talking about the parts of a person. For example, here they are using the example of a musical note, which is in relation with the whole piece. So these psychologists and the researchers here, Akina Wertheimer and Ofgan and the rest, they argued that whole is more than the sum of the parts. That is all what I've been explaining about. And therefore, a given object cannot be understood by analyzing one aspect at a time. It can be understood by having a whole picture. When we talk of global picture, it means a whole picture of it. For example, when you look at the figure below, you can perceive it as a face. Let me move to that figure because it was overtaken by the other slides. It's okay. It is well placed. So when you look at that figure here, we are seeing a whole perception. What we see in this figure is the face of a human being. So here we are saying perception in the figure above, a number of sensations repeated by the dots adds up to create our perception of the face. What we are seeing here is we have so many dots that have been put together to form the face of a human being that we are seeing here. But if we looked at each dot separately, we could not see that form. We cannot see the shape of the face. So when we talk of learning by insight, it is another form of Gestalt theory. It is another form of the way we see things in whole. What picture, what mental image forms when we look at something? That is what we call learning by insight, and it is also in line with the Gestalt theory of learning. So we are saying in learning, Gestalt theory emphasizes that insight as opposed to trial and error. Insight is a restructuring of the mind. The mind is what we are calling the perceptual field, in which what we could not see previously, in which previously unseen relationships are perceived, and all elements of the situation appear to be unified in some way. I don't know why we are signing out. Kindly let us hold on until now 9:30. I'll let you free. So when we talk of learning by insight, it is sudden perception of the relationships in a total situation. For example, the relationship between the organism, the goal, and the intervening obstacles. So when we talk of learning by insights, if I may use an example, when we learn by insight here is what we are saying. You know, sometimes you are faced by a situation and you are asking yourselves what to do. Then all of a sudden, the aha experience comes in. You see the solution problem. That is what we call learning by insight. You see what is surrounding you, and using what is surrounding you or what the environment as where you are, you see the solution to what initially looked like a problem to you. So that is when we talk of the aha experience. You say, oh, huh? You now see a solution to your problem. So that is what we call learning by insight. You are faced with a problem. You see what you have there, and you see within what you have, or within the knowledge that you have in your high order processes of thinking, you can put things together in your mind, and you come up with a solution to what was facing you as a problem. So that was what we actually call insight. So this insight is that kind of trying to relate what we have in our mental images and put them together and see how we can put what we have and solve the problem that we are in at a particular time and point. So that is especially when you see somebody saying, oh, those are the things. You see the solution of the problem immediately. So when we say the relationship between the organism, the goal, and the intervening obstacles, already there was a problem, but you see what you have around you, and therefore you can already form a solution to overcome the obstacles. So some of the factors which affect insight or perception, or which improve the way we interpret new situations, one of the factors here is what we call capacity and the readiness. Teachers must if we understand at what developmental stage they are in, and therefore with capacity and the readiness. Capacity here is in terms of developmental stage the learner is in. And therefore, is the learner ready to accommodate a certain concept? So capacity and readiness, they go together. How much can you accommodate, and are you ready for that particular kind of concepts? So teachers must recognize age and the differences in capacity. We must also look at previous experience, and we are saying that previous knowledge will influence perception in a particular area. I think we understand that because the knowledge we came with from secondary school in our areas of specialization, those of you are doing history, geography, others are doing Kiswahili, CRE, and so on. So, and the business. So what we are saying here is the previous knowledge will influence the perception in a particular area. Even now, there are some questions which once you are given here at this level when you're in the university, you still flash back to your secondary school knowledge, and that one helps you to put your answers or your solutions in a, to modify and be able to map them and lay a basis for your argument for the answers to your questions or to the problems. So that is why we are talking of previous experience. Not previous knowledge will influence perception in a particular area. So that is why we are saying we need, even after this life, when we get out of the university, of course, we'll be given the power to go and do all that appertains to our degree. That means you have the knowledge. May that knowledge help you to handle new situations and interpret and understand new situations depending on where you are in your organization, or where you are in your place of work, or where you are in your business area. So again, here we have structure of the elements in the situation. This implies order of stimuli and methodology. In other words, what do you have around you, and how can you use it to solve the problem that is facing you at the time? So we are also saying that learning by insight, we are looking at the factors. We are looking at the factors that affect or improve perception. We have fabbling and such are preliminary to insight. Fabbling is like, first of all, trying to see what to do, and then as a result of fabbling and the searching, you come up with a solution. I think this one has been captured. So here we are saying, we look at some of the experiments that were done to show the meaning of perception, to show the meaning of insights, learning by insights. So learning by insight, just like we saw in cognitive, it involves use of high order thinking processes. It involves use of our minds, and that is where we see cognition. That is where reasoning comes in, and that is where we do perception and visualize in terms of abstractions. We form images in the mind and therefore come up with solutions. So let me look at two experiments that were done by Kohler using chimpanzees. And what Kohler did, let me just talk about it. He placed a chimpanzee in a cage. So the chimpanzee was caged in a box, and or that cage, and what happened inside the cage, there was a stick, and outside the cage there were ripe bananas, and this chimpanzee was hungry. So on seeing the bananas, the chimpanzee felt restless and wanted to eat the bananas, but he realized that he could not reach to the bananas because he was caged inside that box. But you see what Kola had done, he had placed a stick inside the cage. So suddenly what happens, the chimpanzee perceived the stick inside the cage, and all of a sudden, in the mind of the chimpanzee, he established a relationship between the stick and the bananas. That kind of insight. He saw that if I use the stick, I'll be able to fish the bananas towards the cage, and I'll be able to bring the bananas and use them. So that is the first experiment that Kola did. So in the second experiment, Kola placed two sticks in the same cage where he had caged in an hungry chimpanzee. So the chimpanzee could only get the bananas with the help of both the sticks fitted into each other. So the chimpanzee tried to get the bananas with the help of one stick, but he felt that the stick could not reach where the bananas are. So suddenly he succeeded in fitting both the sticks and then get the bananas. So that is kind of using what is available to you. How do you use it to solve a problem that is facing you now? So this is an example of how we form insights in our mental images. You see what you have, and you form a relationship with what you have and the problem that is facing you, and all of a sudden you can solve the problem. This is the main issue with the Kola and the experiments. So that one, that we see, let me just read it through because now we understand what the Kola is doing with the chimpanzees. Bananas were hung from the ceiling of the cage and a box put at the corner of the cage. So the chimpanzee attempted to get the bananas but could not reach them. So suddenly he established the relationship between the box and the bananas, and therefore he put the box under the banana, climbed on it, and the bananas. So how do you use knowledge you already have to build in a new knowledge? That is all what we are saying in terms of insights, learning by insights. So what do these experiments show? If I may come to the second point here, the experiments emphasize that insight follows a trial and error behavior on part of the animal or the organism. We see the chimpanzee tries to get the bananas, cannot reach, and therefore looks at what is within the surrounding, and sees a stick, sees a box, which he can use and reach bananas. So the by individual and his environment for a psychological needs. According to Guest Psychology, the perception of the field and the gradual restructuring of it is what he calls insight. In simple terms, it's about how do we perceive the environment that we are in? How do we perceive the environment that we are in and use it to solve a problem that is facing us? So gestalists, remember we define what we said. Gestalt is which means seeing the whole or forming a relationship. They developed a number of laws of organization that specify how we perceive whole. Some of these laws are the following laws: Fragnance, law of finger and the ground, the law of proximity, the law of similarity, and the law of closure, and the law of continuity. In other words, it's about how do we perceive the whole? How do we perceive the environment that we are in, and they use it in our mental images to come up with a solution of what is facing us. So here, this is the ground. You can't read this one well. The law of the figure and the ground. At first, when you read this one, at first, what you see is the black figure here. We don't see what is in the surrounding. Okay? So the first thing you see, what you perceive, the instant, what you see is the black figure. You don't see what is within its environment. You look at it in deeper. Can I give you 2 seconds to look at this diagram? The law and the figure. What are you seeing? Yeah, I can see. You are telling me you can see people facing each other. People facing each other. Somebody else can see two faces. Kariuki can also see two faces, and so is Ruth. So the first thing you see is the black figure, which can be a vase. When you look at it, it's like a flower vase, where these things we put on the table and put flowers on, or something that looks like a mortar. But again, when you look at the surrounding, you start seeing other things. Like you can see the white. When you look at the white, so you can see the two faces here. When you look at, you see part of the black figure. When you now relate it to the surrounding, it now forms two faces. That is why we are talking the figure and the ground. The background of where this figure is placed. So the background tells you something else, and the main figure tells you something else. This one says, I am a vase. Is a container where we put flowers. And when you now relate the figure with the ground, it tells you something else. Using the figure, you can form interpretations. So what do you see as a whole? As a whole, using the background, you see two faces. But using the diagram, you see the face, the flower vase. So when you look at the figure and the ground, assumes that perception consists of two aspects. So you also see the ground. So what do you see in the figure? In the figure, which stands out as a definite shape or pattern and is clearly outlined, the black one. The ground, which is more indistinct, it is not very clear at first, because at first you see the black thing, vague or unclear, and has no fixed form or shape. In perception, we tend to distinguish between these two. So in a given environment, you may focus your attention on a certain aspect, which will then become the figure, and the rest is the background within which the figure is situated. So the ground could become your focus. So if I may go back to the ground, the figure and the ground, it depends on where you are focusing. Those of you who saw, somebody, Edmond says he can see the bell glass of water. So what we are saying here is that, sorry. So it will depend on where your focus is. So if your focus is on the main figure, then you see the figure. But if your focus is on the ground, then you see your interpretation of the situation will be different. So that is why we are saying, we are saying that you may focus your attention on a certain aspect, which will then become your figure, and the rest is the background within which the figure is situated. I think we had moved to another point. So to determine the criterion is the degree, the determining criterion of how you see or how you perceive is the degree to which the attention is focused on one rather than the other. So at first, most of you could see the faces of human beings, while others could see the body and Mond is holding the glass of water, which is actually the vase. So in their diagram, it will be difficult to see them simultaneously. You focus on one, the way you interpret it would determine now what the surrounding. Another focus in terms of seeing things in a whole, that is gestolism. Look at this diagram here. The diagram is about horses and riders. What can we see here in the horses and the riders? Where is your focus here? Somebody says, I can see white horses and riders. Yes, Kariuki, you can see white horses and riders. And somebody says 4293, you can say you are seeing riders on black, the others on white. So this one can only see the riders on black and the riders on white, but where are the horses? So somebody is seeing white and black horses. Horses and riders, black horses, the black horses and the black riders. If you focus on white, you see the white horses and the white riders. You're saying, in any given situation, the way you perceive the situation will depend on where your focus is. And that, where do you see the wholesome in what you want to perceive? So here we have white horses and white riders, and we also have black horses in the background. The black horses are in the background and the white horses are in the front. So if you focus in the front, you will see the white horses only. The back will be background. If you focus on the black horses on the background, then you'll be able to see the black horses and the black riders, and your background will be the white, the front. So it is all about perception. It is all about perception. Look at the law of proximity. We can see patterns are forming in terms of how are these close to one another. The law of proximity is another gestolism in terms of you interpret things in terms of the way they are close together to form a pattern. So here we can see the close circle moving horizontally, and then we see an horizontal pattern. Here what are these things? What they are, the forming pattern in vertical. This is because this is law of proximity. They are close together, and when they are close together, they form a pattern. And you can see now the pattern of vertical, while the ones are horizontal. All these are forms of how we view things in a whole. We seem to be moving. Let me see. It's already past 9. So when we meet next, we shall start with implications, educational implications of storytelling. So,
another way kuingia kwa hili.
Who is talking? Who is talking? Who is talking? What is this? Please mute. And if you want to say something, kindly do so in the public chat. But I want to miss you, and sorry that we are on up to 9:40. And thank you for turning up early enough. We have been able to do quite a lot. Thank you for turning up early enough. So we'll meet next, and when we meet next, we shall continue with implications to learning of the guest theories of learning, how we perceive, how we learn by insight, and how we transfer it to our classroom situation. Thank you, and have a good day. Thank you, everybody, wishing me a good day. Thank you, everybody, telling me bye. Let's meet again on Tuesday. And just have done today, sign early enough so that we can do a lot and break early. Allow me to end the meeting, and have a good day, all of you. And thank you for attending the lesson. Thank you, Kariuki Masi, Jillian. Thank you, Krista. Masi Mwangi. Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.